You're watching a WLKY special presentation, Honor Flight Bluegrass.
These guys were true American heroes.
Honoring veterans for their service and sacrifice for our country. Local veterans share their military memories on this emotional journey, Honor Flight Bluegrass.
I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
It's awesome. That's the only word I can come up with, awesome.
I think it's imperative. Time is of the essence to honor them while we can.
The mission to celebrate and honor on this once-in-a-lifetime trip to our nation's capital.
It's one of those things you remember the rest of your life.
Good evening, I'm Drew Gardner. Every year, Honor Flight Bluegrass flies local veterans to our nation's capital to visit the war memorials built in their honor. It's an emotional journey as they remember their service and those who made the ultimate sacrifice. But it's also a way to celebrate all our veterans have done in service of our country. In June, I was invited to go along with 82 local veterans on the first flight back in full force following the pandemic. The flight included veterans who served in Vietnam and Korea, along with one veteran who served during World War II. They shared their military memories during this unforgettable day. For the veterans on this trip, they came home from war knowing so many others did not. While walking these memorials, we heard personal stories about the true human price of war and the pain it still brings even decades later.
On a hot June afternoon, the scorching Washington, D.C. sun shines down on the Vietnam Memorial. The reflections of countless veterans gleam off the sprawling wall as they search for a familiar name among the nearly 60,000 who are no longer here.
It's such a random thing, so there's no justice. If it's your time, it's your time.
Edward Taylor finds the name of a man he served alongside before getting reassigned.
He took my spot, walking point, and he got shot about a week later.
Owensboro native Richard Williams served multiple tours in Vietnam, losing several of his brothers throughout the war.
We went out on a reconnaissance patrol, and a sniper shot him in the neck and killed him. He was from Texas, young Hispanic kid, real nice guy. I liked him. And he actually died in my arms.
Williams himself came close to losing his life multiple times, including during his second tour. One night in 1968, he was out on patrol with a soldier he went through training with at Fort Benning.
He was kind of the class clown in a way, and he always kept you laughing, but he was a neat guy.
But in a moment, everything changed.
We ran over a road mine, and it blew a hole in his leg.
Williams was not injured. He patched up his friend and continued on patrol, later returning to the shocking news that his friend had died.
That night we went back into base camp, and I went to see the doctor, and I said, "What happened? That his wounds were not that great." And he goes, "No, I don't think so either." I said, "Well, what happened?" He says, "He lost the will to live."
At 90 years old, Alan Church is visiting the Korean War Memorial for the first time.
I took my basic training at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the 11th Airborne.
He went on to serve with the 24th Infantry Regiment in Korea, where he served in combat right up until the very last moments of the war.
We were pinned down 14 days on the Wyoming line before the ceasefire was signed, July the 27th of '53.
Even after 7 decades, the memories of that time are still fresh.
It's not a good life. It rains every day, but we're there to protect the country.
William Norris was the lone World War II veteran on this honor flight trip. At 96 years old, he is one of a dwindling number of service members who fought through the war and lived to tell about it.
You lose a lot of memories. So that's how long ago it was.
But walking the memorial grounds, the memories are unavoidable, some too painful to discuss, including a cousin who never made it home.
It's hard to think about. It was a lot happened so short a time.
Under the shade of a tree outside the memorial, Norris shares some of his memories with us.
When it ended, I was in the Philippines.
From there, he went on to Japan, the images of that time still fresh in his mind.
I got to see Hiroshima. I walked through that place. It was terrible. They just demolished the whole town. One bomb.
At Arlington National Cemetery, a storm breaks the intense heat of the day. The rain falling like teardrops on the headstones of so many lives lost. The sound of raindrops and the click of the guard's heels, the only sound at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The veterans of the honor flight stand silent and drenched. The rain suddenly breaks for the changing of the guard.
Shoulder!
The familiar sound of taps begins to play as a fresh wreath is placed at the tomb. The veterans quietly reflecting, thankful they're alive in this moment, while so many of their brothers and sisters are not.
It's very humbling because I wasn't any more skilled than they were. I was just luckier than they were. Absolutely luckier.
It's an army of people who volunteered to step up and help us operate.
Coming up next, it's more than just a flight. What it takes to ensure our local veterans are honored and celebrated every step of the way to create a successful honor flight. Welcome back. Honor Flight Bluegrass is so much more than a free flight to Washington, D.C. Nearly 3,000 volunteer hours go into making sure the veterans aboard are honored and celebrated every turn along the way.
It's all hands on deck at Louisville's Muhammad Ali International Airport as the veterans of the Honor Flight Bluegrass begin to arrive. Check-in time, 5 a.m.
So it's an army of people who volunteered to step up and help us operate.
Jeff Thoke is chairman of the Honor Flight Bluegrass.
My dad was a World War II veteran. My grandfather was a World War I veteran.
He never served himself, but he knows he owes so much to those who have.
You and I are talking freely. And the fact that we can do what we want to do every day here in the United States, the only way that it's been made possible is through our veterans.
For that reason, Thoke has dedicated countless hours to making sure these veterans are honored with the trip of a lifetime. And serenading the veterans throughout the trip are the Ladies for Liberty. Wanda Martin Stainer started the group in 2006, performing at various events honoring veterans. The group took their first honor flight just a few years later.
They weren't sure where we'd fit in, but as soon as we got on the honor flights and started singing, and these guys came alive, and they thought, oh, it's the music, and it's real, it's not piped in, it's real music.
The ladies provide the soundtrack of the trip from start to finish. Dressed completely in vintage World War II attire, each note transporting the men back in time.
These are World War II Corps of Engineer buttons that we got on here. We got extra shoulder pads, we got our hair in rolls, seamed holes. So, you know, it's kind of a picture in itself with the music.
Like so many of the other volunteers, these ladies each have a special connection to veterans.
My father was a World War II veteran, and I lost him 15 years ago. He was a patriot. He would have loved every minute of this. So when I'm in the presence of these heroes, it's like being in the presence of my father again.
The ladies say traveling with so many of these vets to the nation's capital has been the privilege of a lifetime.
To be able to enjoy the music from that era and bring back the good memories, it was just such a touching experience that it's something I just wanted to keep doing.
After a quick hour-and-a-half flight, the plane lands at Reagan International Airport.
The airports know when we're going to get there. American Airlines is a great partner with us. They notify the folks on the ground there, so they know when they're coming in.
As the plane taxis to the gate, a water cannon salute welcomes the veterans. Once inside the terminal, a crowd is there to greet them. From there, the veterans head straight to the buses, where they are whisked off to their first stop, the World War II Memorial. The veterans again receive a hero's welcome, the memorial lined with people holding signs thanking them for their service.
It's a huge coordinated effort, both locally and then nationally, to let all those folks know that we're going to be in D.C. for the day. And they know where they are. They have our itinerary.
And that itinerary is jam-packed. The veterans board the buses once again, making stops at the Vietnam and Korean War memorials. Throughout the entire trip, each veteran is accompanied by a guardian, usually a family member. John Miles is a Gulf War veteran and serves as director of the Office of Veterans Affairs for Louisville Metro Government. On this trip, he acted as a guardian to one of the vets.
It's awesome. That's the only word I can come up with, awesome, because you're blessed to be able to talk with them and share their stories, listen to them, listen to their experiences while they're still here.
The next stop on the trip is the FDR Memorial. From there, it's on to Arlington National Cemetery before heading to the Air Force Memorial and a final stop at the Iwo Jima Memorial. The whirlwind trip left many of the veterans in awe, most of them thinking about the ones who couldn't be here.
It was awesome. I mean, it was touching home. A lot of people sacrificed. A lot of people should have been here, but they couldn't make it.
As the trip winds down and the veterans await their flight home, there is one more surprise: mail call.
So we let everyone know that, hey, if you'd like to write a letter to your loved one thanking them for their service, to send it. We have a location here in town they send it to. We collect it. We put it in packets.
As the veterans open their packets, it takes them back to a special time in their service, back before cell phones and video chats.
So you look forward to the mail coming whenever you received it. And again, World War II, when you got mail maybe once a month or every couple months, but you loved getting the mail when you could. You really look forward to it.
Finally, it's time to go home. And as the veterans make their way through the terminal in Louisville, the ultimate surprise awaits. A crowd of hundreds is there to welcome them back home, capping off an unforgettable day.
Every time I get tears in my eyes for the welcome home, to see how happy they are and honored.
Just one more reminder that despite the passage of time, their sacrifice and service is not forgotten.
If you are interested in volunteering or making a donation to help future Honor Flight trips happen, go to honorflightbluegrass.org.
There's so many of the veterans that when they came home, they didn't receive a parade. They didn't receive thanks.
Celebrating the service and sacrifices of our local veterans decades later, how Honor Flight Bluegrass works to right a wrong of history. Next. Welcome back to Honor Flight Bluegrass. For the 74 Vietnam veterans on the recent honor flight, their return home didn't come with celebration and fanfare. As the war dragged on, the country became increasingly divided, leading to protests and some turning their backs on the military completely. But this trip finally provided them with the honor they deserved for their service to our country.
For veterans of the Vietnam War, a visit to the memorial wall doesn't only bring back painful memories of those lost. For these men, their service ended at a time of turmoil back home. By 1964, protests against the war had erupted on college campuses and in streets across America's cities and continued well into the 70s.
There was no hoopla or ceremony. I got off the plane and just wanted to blend in.
What should have been a joyous return home for veterans like Edward Taylor was instead filled with anger and resentment.
It wasn't the kind of welcome I was looking forward to.
Richard Williams recalls the reception he received in 1967 when arriving in Oakland, California from his first tour.
Spat on us and threw bottles of unknown substances at us. Called us various names and really kind of shook me up. But
his experience was not unique.
Because there's so many of the veterans that when they came home, they didn't receive a parade. They didn't receive thanks. They were asked not to put their uniforms on, or to take their uniforms off and put on civilian clothes when they returned home.
But for the 94 Vietnam veterans on the honor flight, this trip helped restore a sense of pride that was taken from them. Instead of being met with anger, they were met with gratitude. At every turn of the trip, people were waiting to simply say thank you.
Today kind of righted that wrong in my mind, and I got a new respect for our youth in America.
And for those who organized this trip, that's what the honor flight is all about.
We owe our veterans everything, because I think we as Americans sometimes take things for granted.
They just hope this will inspire others to take a moment to acknowledge all they have given for our country.
You know, when you see a veteran, just go up and thank them. You know, whether it's in an airport or in public, and thank your veteran for what they've done. It doesn't matter what era or what time. Just appreciate what they've done for us. We can't say thanks enough for all our veterans that would lay down their life for each of us, that to enable us to do what we do every day.
And for Vietnam veterans like Taylor, that little bit of appreciation means everything.
It's good to get a little bit of recognition. I don't want to be too greedy about that. But yeah, it's been a real good feeling.
Coming up next, a World War II veteran recalls the honor flight he described as a perfect trip.
Everywhere you went, people were wanting to shake your hands and thank you for your service.
Hear from the 95-year-old veteran about his years in service and the memorable visit to our nation's capital. Welcome back. The honor flight may be just one day in these veterans' lives, but for those who have taken the trip, the experience has a lasting impact. We caught up with one World War II veteran who cherishes the memories made on the honor flight to this very day.
At 95 years old, Jack Mooney's energy and spirits are still high. We spent a recent morning at Jack's Georgetown home sharing laughs and stories about his family and time serving in World War II. And of all his life lived, honor flight stands out as one of the most memorable days.
I get a kick out of thinking about it.
That's partly because he didn't want to go.
I really hadn't given it all that much thought until Ellen decided that I was going, and that was that.
Ellen is Jack's daughter and served as his guardian on the honor flight in 2018.
Everywhere you went, people were wanting to shake your hands. Thank you for your service.
It didn't take Jack long to figure out Ellen made the right call.
Everything was just planned to perfection, and it made a perfect trip.
Touring the memorials took Jack back to his time in the service. He began basic training almost immediately after turning 18.
Kind of wakes you up real quick, makes you grow up.
Soon, Jack was off to the Pacific on the USS Walker.
We hit the open sea, and it was up and down like this. I was sick as a dog for a week. I existed on soda crackers for a week.
Jack eventually got used to his life and duties at sea.
I was part of a 5-inch gun crew, and my job was the horizontal movement of the gun.
He says life on the destroyer was mostly boring until the general alarm went off and they sprang into position.
You're so locked in on keeping that target line on the enemy, you don't have time to be scared.
Jack was one of the lucky ones to make it home after the war ended. Now, decades later, he was getting a hero's welcome all over again.
I can't get over it, that there are people who want to do that for people like me.
For Jack, it was the return home to Louisville that stands out the most.
That whole terminal that night was jam-packed. None of us could get over it. It topped off a perfect day.
Now Jack is working to make sure others experience that same perfect day, often spreading the word about the Honor Flight Bluegrass at other veterans events.
Because they showed me such a great time, I want to do anything I can to help them get other people on these flights.
Jack knows all too well that many veterans may be resistant to going at first, just like he was. To them, he has this message.
I would encourage anybody, if you get a chance, go. I can almost guarantee you that anybody that goes on the trip will remember it the rest of their lives.
If you have a special veteran you would like to see experience the honor flight, there's another trip coming up in September. For this trip, they are seeking World War II and Korean War veterans. The flight is scheduled for September 7th. To sign up, head to honorflightbluegrass.org, or you can find a link on WLKY.com. We would like to thank the Honor Flight Bluegrass for taking us along on this trip and the veterans for sharing their emotional journey with us. And to all the veterans at home watching and those no longer with us, we thank you for your service. For WLKY, I'm Drew Gardner. Thanks for watching.